I need to get this off my chest because it's haunted me for 15 years now. I was a correctional officer at a medium security prison in Virginia for 5 years, and in that time, I saw thousands of inmates come through those doors. Most of them, guilty as sin. Some of them, probably got what they deserved. A handful, got screwed by the system in ways that made my blood boil. But there's one case that keeps me up at night, one face I can't forget, one story that made me question everything about the justice system I swore to uphold. His name was Marcus Webb, though everyone called him Mark. And I'm convinced to this day that he didn't belong behind those walls. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Marcus came through intake. I remember because Tuesdays were always the worst. Weekend arrests had been processed, court hearings had wrapped up on Monday, and we'd get the overflow of new inmates being transferred in. I was working the processing unit that day, which meant I was responsible for checking in new arrivals, going through their paperwork, assigning cell blocks, the whole 9 yards. Marcus wasn't like the others who came through that day. Most guys coming in fall into one of two categories. Either they're scared shitless, eyes darting around, trying to figure out if they're going to survive their first night, or they're veterans of the system, cocky and loud, acting like they own the place before they even get their prison blues. Marcus was neither. He was quiet, eerily calm, with this look of complete disbelief on his face, like he was waiting to wake up from a nightmare. He was 32 years old, stood about 6 feet 2 inches, built like someone who worked for their muscle rather than got it from a gym membership. His paperwork said he'd been a bouncer, which tracked. What didn't track was the sentence. 15 years. For a first-time violent offender, that seemed excessive. But then I saw it, the red flag in his file that explained everything. 3 strikes enhancement. 10 additional years. My stomach dropped. I'd seen the 3 strikes law destroy lives before, but usually it was career criminals who'd finally run out of chances. I pulled up Marcus's record on the computer while he stood there in his orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him, waiting for me to finish processing him in. Strike 1. Possession of marijuana with intent to distribute. 7 years prior. Did 18 months. Strike 2. Aggravated assault. 4 years prior. Bar fight where he'd been working as a bouncer. Broke a guy's jaw who'd been beating on his girlfriend in the parking lot. Did 2 years. Strike 3. Malicious wounding. Current charge. 10 years mandatory minimum because of the enhancement. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had 12 other guys to process before my shift ended. I assigned Marcus to C block, gave him his bedding and basic supplies, and sent him on his way with a guard escort. I figured that would be the last time I really paid attention to him. I was wrong. About 3 weeks after Marcus arrived, I was assigned to C block for evening rounds. This was the shift where things usually stayed quiet. Dinner had been served, guys were in their cells or in the common area watching TV, playing cards, or just killing time until lights out. I was doing my walkthrough, checking cells, making sure nobody was cooking up trouble when I passed Marcus's cell. He was sitting on his bunk, writing in a notebook. Not unusual, lots of guys kept journals or wrote letters, but something made me stop. Maybe it was the intensity in his face, or the fact that he looked like he was composing something important rather than just scribbling to pass time. "Webb," I called out. He looked up, surprised. "What show working on?" Most inmates don't like talking to COs unless they have to, and I didn't expect much of a response. But Marcus set down his pen and walked to the bars. "My appeal, sir," he said. His voice was deep but measured, respectful. "Trying to get my case reviewed." I nodded. Every inmate claimed they were innocent, claimed they were working on an appeal, claimed the system had screwed them. It was background noise after a while. But something about the way he said it, without anger, without desperation, just as a matter of fact, made me curious. "What are you in for?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Malicious wounding," he said. And then he did something that surprised me. He laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a crazy laugh, but the kind of laugh you make when something is so absurd you can't help yourself. I pushed a camera away from my face, and it cut the guy holding it. "Got 15 years for it." 3 strikes? I asked. He nodded slowly. 3 strikes. I should have walked away. I should have moved on to the next cell, finished my rounds, gone home to my wife and kids and forgotten about Marcus Webb. But I didn't. "Tell me what happened." I said. The camera that changed everything. Marcus leaned against the bars of his cell, and for the next 20 minutes, he told me his story. I've heard a lot of stories in prison, some true, some false, most somewhere in between. But the way Marcus told it, with specific details, with an almost photographic memory of that night, made me listen in a way I usually didn't. It was a Saturday night in April, 3 years before I met him. Marcus was working as a bouncer at a club called Encore in downtown Richmond. It wasn't a dive bar, but it wasn't upscale either. Just a mid-level place that got busy on weekends, played decent music, and attracted a mixed crowd of college kids and young professionals. Marcus had been working there for about 8 months. Good job, decent pay, and most nights were uneventful. Break up a few drunken arguments, toss out the occasional asshole who couldn't take no for an answer, and make sure nobody left too trashed to function. That particular night had been busier than usual. Some local DJ was spinning, and the place was packed. Around midnight, a fight broke out near the bar. 2 guys arguing over a girl, typical stupid shit. Marcus and another bouncer, a guy named Devin, broke it up quick. They separated the 2 idiots, and Marcus escorted one of them outside to cool off. Here's where it gets interesting. As Marcus is standing outside with the guy he just ejected, making sure he doesn't try to sneak back in or start trouble with people on the sidewalk, a news van pulls up. It's from one of the local stations doing a puff piece on nightlife in the city. You know the kind, some perky reporter asking drunk people what they love about Richmond, showing people having a good time, basically free advertising for the bars and clubs. The reporter, a woman in her late 20s, approaches Marcus and the other doorman. She's got a cameraman with her, this guy in his 40s with a press badge hanging around his neck and an expensive-looking camera on his shoulder. The reporter asks if they can do a quick interview about working security at the club, what the nightlife is like, generic questions. Marcus politely declines. He's working, he doesn't want to be on TV, and frankly, he just doesn't feel like it. The reporter smiles, says no problem, and starts to walk away. But the cameraman doesn't stop filming. Marcus notices the red recording light is still on, and the camera is pointed right at him. He asks the guy to stop filming. The cameraman ignores him. Marcus asks again, more firmly this time. The cameraman gets defensive, starts going into this whole speech about freedom of the press, how they're on a public sidewalk, how he has every right to film. Technically, he's not wrong. But technically doesn't mean it's not a dick move. The cameraman then does something that would change Marcus's life forever. He steps closer, gets right in Marcus's face, and shoves the camera lens toward him, basically taunting him with it. "I can film whatever I want," he says. "You can't do anything about it." Now, Marcus is a bouncer. His job is to deal with aggressive assholes every single night. His job is to defuse situations, to set boundaries, to physically intervene when necessary. So he does what any bouncer would do in that situation. He puts his hand up, palms the camera lens, and pushes it away from his face. He pushed it with force. Not violent force, not "I'm trying to hurt you" force, but the kind of force you use when you're setting a boundary and making it clear you're not playing around. The problem? The edge of the camera's viewfinder caught the cameraman right above his eyebrow. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a shove to the guy's body. It was an incidental contact that happened because Marcus pushed the camera away and the cameraman was holding it too close to his own face. But it cut him. Not a deep cut, not stitches, but enough to bleed. And the cameraman immediately starts screaming like he's been assaulted. 2 police officers who'd been standing across the street came running over. Marcus tried to explain what happened. The doorman backed him up, said the cameraman had been harassing them. But here's the thing that sealed Marcus's fate. One of the cops recognized him. Officer Reynolds. Marcus had dealt with him twice before, once during his possession charge, once during the assault charge where he defended the woman in the parking lot. Reynolds didn't like Marcus. Thought he was a thug, a troublemaker, someone who needed to be taken down a peg. And now here was his chance. Reynolds arrested Marcus on the spot for malicious wounding. Not simple assault, which would have been a misdemeanor. Malicious wounding, which is a Class 3 felony in Virginia. The cameraman pressed charges. The video footage, which conveniently started recording just moments before Marcus pushed the camera, missing all the harassment and the cameraman's aggressive behavior, was used as evidence. Marcus's public defender advised him to take a plea deal, but Marcus refused. He wanted to fight it, wanted to tell his side of the story. Big mistake. The jury saw a big black man with 2 prior felonies on his record who'd assaulted a member of the press. They saw the video of him pushing the camera. They saw the cut on the cameraman's face. They didn't see the context. They didn't care about the harassment. And because it was Marcus's 3rd felony, the 3 strikes law kicked in automatically. 5 years for the malicious wounding charge. 10 additional years for the enhancement. 15 years total for pushing a camera away. I started digging. After that conversation, I couldn't let it go. I went home that night and told my wife about it. She's a paralegal, much smarter than me when it comes to legal stuff, and I asked her if what Marcus told me made sense from a legal standpoint. If it's his 3rd felony, yeah, the 3 strikes law would apply, she said. But malicious wounding requires intent. If he didn't intend to hurt the guy, a good lawyer should have been able to argue it down. He had a public defender, I said. She winced. Public defenders are overworked, underpaid, and handling 50 cases at once. They do their best, but they can't give every case the attention it deserves. I started doing something I probably shouldn't have done. I started looking into Marcus's case. I pulled his file from the records office, technically allowed since I was his CO, but definitely bending the rules by digging as deep as I did. I read the arrest report, the trial transcripts, the witness statements. The more I read, the more my stomach turned. The video footage that was used as evidence? It was less than 30 seconds long. It showed Marcus pushing the camera, the cameraman stumbling back, and blood on his face. It didn't show the 2 minutes before that where the cameraman was harassing Marcus, where Marcus repeatedly asked him to stop filming, where the cameraman got aggressive. The witness statements were a joke. The reporter said she didn't see what happened because she'd already walked away. The doorman who was standing right there and backed up Marcus's version of events? His statement was in the file, but the prosecutor never called him to testify. The 2 drunk guys who'd been fighting and were still standing outside? They weren't interviewed at all. And Officer Reynolds's arrest report? It was a masterclass in bias. He described Marcus as aggressive, confrontational, and violent, despite the fact that multiple witnesses said Marcus had been calm and professional until the cameraman got in his face. The DA had pushed for the malicious wounding charge specifically because it was a felony. They could have charged him with simple assault, a misdemeanor that would have resulted in maybe 6 months in jail at most, but they went for the throat. And once it was a felony, the 3 strikes law was unavoidable. I sat in my home office at 2 in the morning, reading through the trial transcript, and I realized something that made me feel sick. Marcus Webb had been railroaded by a system that decided he was guilty before he ever stepped into a courtroom. I broke protocol. I wasn't supposed to get involved. COs aren't advocates. We're not lawyers. We're not investigators. Our job is to maintain order, keep inmates safe, and make sure the facility runs smoothly. Getting personally invested in an inmate's case is a good way to lose your job, or worse, lose the respect of your colleagues and become a target for manipulation. But I couldn't let it go. I started talking to Marcus more during my rounds. I asked him questions about his case, about his life before prison, about his family. I learned that he had a daughter, 8 years old when he got locked up, who he hadn't seen in over a year because his ex-girlfriend had moved 2 states away and couldn't afford to bring her to visit. I learned that he'd been planning to go back to school to become an electrician before his arrest. I learned that he coached a youth basketball team on weekends and that half the parents in the neighborhood wrote character letters for him that the judge barely glanced at during sentencing. Marcus wasn't a saint. He'd made mistakes. The marijuana charge was legit, he admitted that. The assault charge was more complicated, but he took responsibility for it even though he'd been defending someone. But this 3rd charge was bullshit, and everyone who looked at it with clear eyes could see it. I did something I probably should have been fired for. I reached out to a lawyer I knew from church, a guy named Tom Bradshaw who did some pro bono work on the side. I told him about Marcus's case, gave him the basics, and asked if he'd be willing to take a look. Tom was skeptical at first. He'd heard a million "I'm innocent" stories from inmates over the years, but he agreed to review the file I'd copied. Again, bending some serious rules here. A week later, he called me. "This is fucked up," he said bluntly. "This guy got screwed." Tom agreed to take Marcus's case for free and started filing motions for a new trial based on ineffective assistance of counsel and prosecutorial misconduct. It was a long shot. Overturning a conviction is incredibly difficult, but it was something. Watching Marcus go through the appeals process was torture. Hope is a dangerous thing in prison. I'd seen it destroy men who clung to it too hard, who believed their appeal would come through, who were certain they'd be released, only to have their hopes crushed over and over again. But Marcus was different. He didn't let hope consume him. He kept his head down, stayed out of trouble, worked his job in the kitchen, and wrote letters to his daughter every single week even though she was too young to write back consistently. He was the model inmate, respectful to guards, didn't get involved in gang politics, helped younger inmates adjust to prison life. Other COs started noticing too. My buddy Derek, who'd been working at the prison for 12 years, mentioned Marcus to me one day in the break room. "That Webb guy in C Block," Derek said. "He's solid. Don't know what he did to get 15 years, but he doesn't belong here." "Push to camera," I said. Derek looked at me like I was joking. When he realized I wasn't, he just shook his head. "System's broken, man." Tom worked on the case for nearly 2 years. There were multiple hearings, motions, appeals to higher courts. Every time it looked like we might get somewhere, another door closed. The original trial judge refused to grant a new trial. The state appellate court upheld the conviction. It felt like the system was protecting its own mistake rather than admitting it had screwed up. Marcus handled every setback with a grace I didn't understand. I asked him once how he stayed so calm, how he didn't lose his mind with frustration. "Getting angry won't get me out of here," he said simply. "And if I let this place make me bitter, then I really will become the person they said I was." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The cameraman who'd pressed charges against Marcus, a guy named Brian Kellerman, got arrested for assault. Turns out he had a history of aggressive behavior, had been fired from 2 previous news stations for altercations with people he was filming, and had pending complaints from 3 other people who said he'd harassed them while recording. Tom found out about it through a contact at the courthouse and immediately filed a motion to introduce this new evidence. It showed a pattern of behavior that supported Marcus's version of events, that Kellerman had been the aggressor, that he had a history of provoking people while hiding behind his camera and press credentials. Even better, Tom tracked down the reporter who'd been with Kellerman that night. She'd left journalism and was working in PR now, and when Tom contacted her, she was willing to give a statement. She said she'd been uncomfortable with how Kellerman was treating Marcus that night, that he'd been unnecessarily aggressive, and that she tried to get him to back off, but he'd ignored her. She also said that Kellerman had edited the video footage before turning it over to police, cutting out the part where he'd been harassing Marcus. That last part was huge. Withholding exculpatory evidence is grounds for overturning a conviction. Tom filed an emergency motion and finally, a judge agreed to review the case. I left before I saw the end. Here's the part that kills me. I don't know how Marcus's story ends. I left the prison system 4 months after Tom filed that final motion. It wasn't because of Marcus's case specifically, though that was part of it. I'd been feeling burned out for a while, questioning whether I was making a difference or just a cog in a broken machine. My wife was pregnant with our second kid, and the overnight shifts were killing me. I took a job in private security, better hours, better pay, less moral ambiguity. On my last day, I went to see Marcus. I wasn't supposed to have personal conversations with inmates, especially long goodbyes, but I didn't care anymore. "I think you're getting out," I told him. Tom's confident about this appeal. Marcus smiled, but it was a careful smile. The smile of someone who'd learned not to hope too hard. "Maybe," he said, "and if I don't, I'll survive. I've made it this far." We shook hands through the bars, which was definitely against protocol, and I walked away from C Block for the last time. It's been 10 years since I left that prison. I tried to keep track of Marcus's case for a while, but once I was out of the system, I lost access to the records and lost touch with Tom. I don't know if Marcus ever got his conviction overturned. I don't know if he's still locked up, finishing his sentence, or if he's out there somewhere, living the life that was stolen from him. What I do know is this: Marcus Webb was innocent of the crime he was convicted of. Not technically innocent. Not probably didn't deserve 15 years. He was actually genuinely innocent. He defended himself from harassment, reacted the way any reasonable person would react, and had the catastrophic bad luck of doing it in front of a cop who already had it out for him and a cameraman who was willing to lie to save face. The three strikes law is supposed to keep career criminals off the streets. It's supposed to protect society from people who refuse to change, who keep committing serious crimes despite multiple chances. But in Marcus's case, it took a man who'd made some mistakes, who was trying to turn his life around, who had a daughter who needed him, and it buried him under 15 years of concrete and steel for pushing a camera. I think about Marcus every time I hear someone talk about criminal justice reform, every time someone says the system works, every time someone assumes that everyone in prison belongs there. I think about his daughter, who's in her 20s now, who grew up without a father because a cameraman wanted to be a tough guy and a cop wanted to pad his arrest record. And I think about all the Marcus Webbs out there, the ones who didn't have a CO who gave a shit, who didn't have a pro bono lawyer willing to fight for them, who are sitting in cells right now for crimes they didn't commit or punishments that don't fit what they did. I don't know if Marcus ever got justice, but I know he deserved it, and I know I'll never forget him. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. A lot of you are asking if there's any way to find out what happened to Marcus. I've been thinking about reaching out to Tom Bradshaw, the lawyer, if he's still practicing. I'll update if I find anything out. Edit 2. To everyone asking why I didn't do more. I did what I could within the constraints of my job and my life. Could I have done more? Maybe. Should I have? Probably. But I was a CO with a mortgage and a family, not a crusading journalist or a civil rights lawyer. I helped where I could, and I've had to make peace with that. Edit 3. For those asking about three strikes laws in other states, yes, this happens everywhere. Look up the case of Curtis Wilkerson in California, who got life without parole for stealing a pair of socks because it was his third strike. The system is broken in ways most people don't realize until it touches their lives.